Hi everyone! So today I basically just wanted to sit down, chill and chat about books I'm excited for. Back at the end of 2020, like most booktubers, I did a video all about the books I was most excited about coming out in 2021. In fact, I talked about 21 books in that video, and that was a list I had to narrow down, which is completely out of this world to me because even since then I've learned about more books I'm super excited for. So although the list is ever growing, and I probably will never manage to keep up with it, I still want to share with you those books that really call to me, that I really will be keeping an eye on as they're released because I love the author, or I think the plot sounds fantastic, or they're doing something new. And I just thought, whilst I was sitting here on a cold snowy day, why don't I just tell you about some more books? These are 10 books that I'm super excited about that have yet to come out and are still going to be coming out in 2021. They are no less anticipated than the ones I talked about in my previous video. They are just other books I'm equally as anticipated for, if that makes sense, basically. And hopefully you will enjoy this even though it doesn't necessarily have a specific time period. This isn't like books I'm specifically interested in spring. It's just ones I haven't talked about yet, in effect, and I want to talk about them and I want to give them a little bit of hype because it's a big deal having a book coming out. So yeah, I'm going to tell you about 10 books I'm super excited about that are coming out this year. I will tell you when they're coming out based on what NetGalley or the publisher's website or Amazon is telling me. That is obviously subject to change, and I will obviously link my previous video like this in the description box in case you're looking for still yet more books after this. But without further ado, in no particular order, these are the books I'm excited about in 2021 that I haven't talked about yet. So first up I want to mention Paradise by K. Tempest. So K. Tempest is one of my all-time favourite poets of all time. They have also written plays and novels in the past. I've only read their poetry, but I adore it. I've also listened to their music. I have one of their albums on vinyl. They're just phenomenal. And this is actually a play. So not only is this a play by an all-time favourite author of mine, but it's a retelling of a Greek myth. It's the retelling of the Greek classic Philoctetes by Sophocles. So Sophocles was an ancient Greek playwright who wrote a play called Philoctetes, and this is now a modern play based on that ancient Greek play, and I think that's such a fun concept. I think it's also going to be performed on stage whenever we're able to go and see theatre again, and that would be amazing. I'd love to go and see it, but regardless I'm still going to be picking up a copy of the play and reading it when it comes out, which is supposedly the 5th of August. And I also trust K. Tempest so much with this topic because they've retold Greek mythology before in previous work, in particular my favourite poetry collection by them, and possibly my favourite poetry collection of all time, which is Hold Your Own, and that retells the story of Tiresias. So I'm so excited to see what they do with this myth, with this piece of ancient literature, and also just have more to consume by them because they are an incredible writer and performance artist. Next up is a book by an author I haven't read before, and that is The Mary Shelley Club by Goldie Moldavsky. And to be honest, it was that title that immediately drew me in, and then I saw the cover. This was on NetGalley and I knew I was going to be picking this one up as soon as it came out because it just looks and sounds incredible. I'm also on this massive horror thriller binge at the moment, if you can't tell, so it appealed to my current interests. It's a YA thriller, which, to start with, I love YA thrillers, that is described as Scream meets Karen M. McManus. I love Scream. Scream is one of my favourite film franchises. You may not know this about me. I think it's incredible. I rewatched all 4 of them last year with my boyfriend who hadn't seen them before, and we had so much fun returning to them. Well, for me it was returning, for him it was a first time watch. And I also love Karen M. McManus, so this is so much fun. I love that comparison. And it's all about horror movie buffs, so already recalling Scream there. Rachel Chavez, who's recruited to the Mary Shelley Club, a secret society at her prep school, which again I love. I also feel like this one is combining a little bit of dark academia in there, a little bit of school Gossip Girl secret history type vibes, which I know a lot of us love. So all in all it just sounds like such a fantastic combination that I really want to see how it delivers that. Unlike the previous book though, The Mary Shelley Club does come out on the 13th of April, so a little bit sooner. Back to authors I've already read, and that is A Master of Gin by P. Djeli Clark. This is the 3rd book in a series by this author, which is all about an alternative history Cairo at the beginning of the 20th century where jinn and other magical creatures exist around the city. And in the previous 2 works we follow different detectives for this sort of paranormal police agency which control and look out for the paranormal aspect of Cairo's life and city life and everything going on there. And in this book, which I'm particularly excited about, we return to the protagonist from book 1, who was Fatima. And I recently reviewed book 2, which I enjoyed but did miss Fatima in. I loved her character and I'm so excited to have her coming back in a new story. I think P. Djeli Clark is also just a phenomenal writer. I've read some of his other books in the past, like Black God's Drums and Ring Shout, and he just does phenomenal stuff with alternate history, but exploring very contemporary topics at the same time, or exploring historical topics through a really interesting lens, and I love that. So I'm just excited to see what is in store for our characters in this new installment. And this one should be available from the 11th of May. Actually jumping backwards a little bit to an author I've already mentioned, and that is another book by Karen M. McManus, who a previous book, as you've just heard, was compared to, and this is You'll Be the Death of Me. So Karen M. McManus is a YA thriller writer. I've read 3 out of 4 of her current books and really enjoyed them all. So she's basically an instant buy author for me, and I'm obviously intrigued by anything she has coming out. And it's about 3 friends, or 3 students who used to be friends. They were very good friends in middle school. It's now high school. They've kind of fallen out of touch, but one day one of our friends turns up to school late only to find those 2 friends that he used to be close to are also late, and they all decide to ditch school. So a little bit like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I think with a murdery side plot, so we will see. And that one comes out on the 7th of October 2021, so still a little bit to wait. One you really don't have to wait long for though, however, is coming on the 16th of March, and that is Skyward In by Elia Whiteley. So Elia Whiteley writes the most strange, surrealist, weird fiction, I guess you would call them. They probably fall into the weird, surrealist fiction genre novels, and I have adored everything I've read by her, and it has crept inside my mind and sometimes given me nightmares. It's not all horror, but when it is horror, it's horrific. And she also has the most beautiful prose, and it's the strangest yet most pleasing combination. So I'm always intrigued to see what she has coming out next. And from what I understand, going off the NetGalley description, this one is a bit of science fiction, and it's set in a futuristic world where Earth invaded another planet who gave in very quickly and just, like, you know, gave up to Earth and surrendered. However, it's now a little while later and it all isn't as clear cut as it seems, and maybe Earth didn't win the war, and maybe it's a lot more complicated than that. I don't really know what I'm getting myself in for. I haven't read a futuristic sci-fi novel by Elia Whiteley before, but I'm really intrigued to see what she does with the genre. We then have Reputation by Lex Croucher, which is coming out on the 8th of July, and I am so buzzed for this book. It sounds so brilliant. Plus, based on the description of the tone of this book, it has the perfect author. At first glance, this one seems like your typical Regency romp, historical romance, but I'm pretty sure the twists and turns are coming. It is meant to be quite humorous in tone. It's meant to expose the darker side of the 19th century ton with drug use and parties and all the stuff that you don't usually read about but was definitely going on, plus Lex Croucher's absolutely phenomenal wit, which you're all probably aware of if you watch Lex's channel. They are just hilarious. They have the best sense of humour, honestly. It is so clever, so witty, so dry, and I'm so excited to see it all sort of mesh together with a Regency romp. It doesn't sound quite like any other Regency rom-coms I've read before, so I'm really excited for something a little bit new. If you were thinking to yourself, however, that I must have covered all of the YA thrillers that were going to be in this video, you would have been mistaken, because I have another one, and that is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. And this is the 3rd book in Holly Jackson's The Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which I adore. Good Girl's Guide to Murder and its sequel are some of my favourite thrillers of all time, YA or regardless. I think they're so clever. I think they're so incredibly clever, and I was so excited when I first learned there was a sequel to Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and then it lived up to those expectations, so you can just imagine how excited I am for a 3rd book in that series. This one comes out on the 5th of August, and it is about our, like, young detective Pip Fitzamobi from books 1 and 2, but this time there there is danger that is far more personal on the horizon when she starts receiving death threats just before she's off to Cambridge University. I won't say more than that because obviously if you haven't read the previous 2 books you don't want those spoiled, but honestly I would so recommend that you get started on that series in time for this one coming out on the 5th of August. Now this next one I was honestly kind of appalled that I didn't mention in my last video. I can't remember if it's just if I hadn't heard of it yet or I'd only heard about it so recently that I forgot to put it on my list, but it's obviously one of my most anticipated releases of 2021 because it's The Women of Troy by Pat Barker. Now Pat Barker is a well-revered author who has written so many incredible books, often dealing with themes of war and mental trauma, and a couple of years ago she took her hands to the Trojan War with The Silence of the Girls, which particularly explores the experience of Briseis, a Trojan princess who is taken as a slave by Achilles, one of the Greek soldiers, throughout the war, and it's incredible. It is one of the most raw, honest looks at what life possibly could have been like for women during ancient warfare that I've read in fiction or non-fiction, and I loved it. I actually interviewed Pat Barker on my podcast. If you're interested, I'll link it down below, but she was such an amazing guest, and the prospect of her having written another ancient Greek myth inspired book tackling those themes is so exciting to me. This one obviously again is about Troy, but rather than being set during the Trojan War, it is about events after the Trojan War, after the fall of Troy. So in part inspired, I imagine, by the Trojan Women by Euripides, which is an ancient Greek play all about the distribution of the Trojan women as slaves after the war. So again, I think similar in some themes, but will deal with new women's stories and offer up so much more to this genre. And that one, if I didn't mention, comes out on the 26th of August. Sticking with the sort of ancient Greek classical theme, however, we have 2 more books to go, and the next one is Madam by Phoebe Wynne. This one has a few selling points for me. First up, it's set in Scotland. It's set at a boarding school in a rural part of Scotland overlooking these dark, mysterious cliffs, you know, very atmospheric, which I love. And it's about a classics teacher. It's about a young woman who takes on a job as a classics teacher at this boarding school. But it's not all as charming, but it's not all as whimsical and charming as it might seem at first. And of course there is a darker side to this school that we get to know throughout this story. Then last but not least we have The Maidens by Alex McCaley, which comes out on the 10th of June. And let me just read you the sort of opening sentence to this one's blurb on Amazon, which is from the author of the global #1 best-selling debut The Silent Patient, which I heard great things about, comes a spellbinding literary thriller which weaves together Greek mythology, psychology and murder. Literally, I don't need to read any more because I love me a thriller and I love me some Greek mythology, so I'm super excited to see more books combining those 2 things. I remember the first time I read The Secret History and being so blown away, so give me more books. So if I could stop kicking my camera for a minute there, then I would just like to say please keep writing those kind of books because I want to read them. But yep, those are the 10 books that I hadn't yet had a chance to talk to you about that I'm really excited for that are coming out in 2021. Do let me know if there are any books coming out in 2021 that you're super excited about, because there's no cap on the length of my anticipated releases list. And I'd love to add some more. But until next time, happy reading and I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone!